Get in. Oh! Man, I tell you, who didn't love going to the arcade as a child? I don't think anyone didn't love that. Well, I'm going to tell you my adventures at the arcade.
I got a pocket full of quarters and I'm headed to the arcade. I don't have a lot of money, but I'm bringing everything I made.
Welcome to the first episode of Memory from the Arcade. Well, I'll tell you about some adventures I had at a local arcade. Now, let me take you back to 1985. I was 13 years old, on summer break, and me and my family was heading to Sin City of the East, Atlantic City, New Jersey, the home of the Monopoly board game, from Boardwalk to St. Charles Place. Atlantic City had it all for a coming-of-age teenager. However, I wasn't your typical coming-of-age teenager, that's for sure. While most 13 years old would find a way to ditch their parents to sink their freshly cleaned toes into the Atlantic City beach sand, or try to find pleasure in the cheap, loving arms of the oldest profession. But I found myself in the arms of another sinister lover, one that knew how to lure you inside and trap a young boy like me. And no, I'm not talking about the cheap price hot dogs on the boardwalk. And I'm not talking about the one-armed bandit that robbed so many of Atlantic City of its youth and spirit. For me, I'm talking about something a lot more seductive. And it was only a few feet away from the smoky casinos. Between those shady hotels was Bill's Arcade and Soda. It looked like a fun, innocent place. But as I soon learned, a storefront can be deceiving. As my parents gambled away my college tuition, I pushed open the dirty, fingerprint-filled glass door and walked into a world that would forever change my life. Don't get me wrong, back home we had arcades, but most of these were filled with local kids. Kids from my school, or at least close by. We all kind of knew each other. Not only that, but it was full of familiar games that were already about 3 years old before we got them. My local arcade, I knew the smell, I knew the games, I knew every chip of missing paint on the back corner jump bug machine, and how to use the broken leg on the Elton John pinball machine to make sure you avoid the left bumper with the sensor that didn't work. I mean, why risk losing a ball if you're not going to get any points for it? But that was my local arcade. This one was darker, louder, fresher. As I stood on the Welcome PacMan Fever decal, I looked deep into the arcade, and I knew right then this wasn't like home. First to hit me was the smell of 3-hour-old nachos and cotton candy coming from the small cafe in the back corner. My local arcade had nothing like that. And second, it was the games. Games a southern boy like me had only read about in the back of my brother's Fangora magazine. For where I was standing, I couldn't make out all the games. But I could make out some. There was Tapper, the famous Dragon Slayer, Mappy, and I'm not a 100% sure. I think way back in the corner I could see a working elevator action arcade game. As I stepped deeper into the dark, loud arcade, off in the distance I could hear the sounds of a dying ghost on Junior Pac-Man, a missed jump on Congo Bongo, and the sounds of a splattering pickle on Burger Chef. I could hear the sounds of the tokens crashing into the metal cup on the change machine a few feet away. So I made my way into the arcade, passing rows and rows of pinball machines, and then made my way to the cabinet games, and that's where I saw it. A game I knew very well, Miss Pac-Man. Now, not to brag, back home I was kind of known as the local Miss Pac-Man champion. Now, of course, when I say local, I don't mean across the whole city or state, just my little area of the world. Once I remember I even tried to impress a school crush I had, Amy Covey, when I tried to challenge a college kid at a game of Miss Pac-Man. I thought if she saw me beat a college adult, that she would be in love with me forever. I did beat the college arcade player. However, Amy Covey missed it all, as she was in awe watching a junior high school football player show off his impressive skills throwing the balls into the mouth of a wooden clown. But here I was, miles away from Amy Covey and miles away from my home arcade. No one here knew me. And best of all, no one here knew each other. All these kids were kids of vacationing parents who was off gambling away their life savings and sending their kids to waste time at the arcade. Even if I was to beat one of these kids at Miss Pac-Man, did it really matter? Next week, the arcade will be full of all new kids. Only person at the arcade that could even remember my great Miss Pac-Man skills was the employee that seemed very stressed out and way behind schedule and way behind on his promise to fix a machine that just took someone's token. So before playing Miss Pac-Man, I had to venture over to the change machine, change my dollar bills into tokens, but then hurry back to Miss Pac-Man. I stood in front of it, looking at the greasy joystick, the missing paint on the side from people leaning on it watching others play. My eyes then saw something else, the top score on Miss Pac-Man, 105,440. An impressive score for sure, but not something I couldn't beat in my sleep back home. So I reached into the pocket of my regular jeans and pulled out a token. Before dropping the token in, I looked around to see if anyone was watching. Honestly, no one cared that I was playing the game. But I had to start somewhere. My plan was to beat the high score, sit back, watch other kids come play Miss Pac-Man, and then let it slip out to them that, hey, that high score, that was done by me. Now next week there might be a whole group of new kids who didn't know who put the high score on the machine, but all these kids, they were going to remember me. They were going to take home tales about the best Miss Pac-Man player ever. For once, my skills at playing Miss Pac-Man was going to be known outside the Appling Middle School district. So I dropped the token into the slot, placed one hand on the side of the wooden cabinet, and with the other hand, grabbed the joystick. My eyes locked dead on the center screen. As the game started, I jerked that joystick like I'd never jerked anything in public before. Left, right, up and down, sliding in exits, sliding out of exits, eating dots, eating ghosts. Whole time glancing up at my score, glancing over to the high score, watching it, planning each move with precise details. I was confident and I was on a roll. As the screen went into its cartoon act break, I used them moments to rest my fingers from the joystick. But doesn't take long, then we're back in action. And as level 3 started, I did something I normally do not do. I went for the dancing orange scrolling across the screen. Now I know the fruit on Miss Pac-Man is hardly ever worth the risk of going after, unless maybe it's a fruit that's above the pretzel. But I'm not sure I forgot that rule this time. Maybe it was the smell of a pizza coming out of the oven at the cafe close by, or maybe it was just me taking a risk. Whatever the reason was, I went for it. I knew I could get this orange. I went up to the top corner, through an exit, came out the left side, and right into the waiting arms of Sue the ghost. My first Pac-Man was lost. That's when I heard a laugh coming over my left shoulder, and a soft female voice telling me, "You never go after the fruit. It's always a trap." I looked back to see a girl about my same age. She looked like she may have just returned from a junior Madonna lookalike contest. Now I was hardly a big fan of Madonna, but this girl was like anything I've seen in my life. At least anything I saw back home in Georgia. It was hard to take my eyes off of her, but I had to get them back on the game. As I got back to the game, I let her know Pac-Man's about the score, not how many levels you can get through. And if you want to have the high score, sometimes you do have to take the risk and go for it. She laughed and I started level 3. That's when she started to brag about how good she was at Miss Pac-Man. She told me she made it up to the level where the ghosts don't even change colors. She told me you can only get that far if you don't go for it. Who was this mysterious girl? And how dare she tell me how to play Miss Pac-Man? As I ate some ghosts, I let her know again. It was about getting a high score, not seeing how many levels I could get through. And that's how it was. I was often playpill Miss Pac-Man, and sure, they might get to a higher level than me, or stage if you want to call it that, but I, at the end of the game, would always have the high score. But she didn't agree. She told me it was more impressive to get through a lot of stages and have a good score also. In a way, maybe she was right, but I didn't want to admit it to her. She moved over to my right side as I lost another Miss Pac-Man. Then she started to tell me that I had a good score, but what I needed to do was wait till the ghosts were closer to the power pellets. That way I could eat all 4 ghosts at one time and get a better score. I knew this. I knew Miss Pac-Man. Who was she to tell me how to play Miss Pac-Man? Then she added that I was missing a lot of easy points. As I yanked the controller up and down, fighting the curves and eating more dots. I knew how to get a good score. I told her, you just stay there and watch. With my free hand, I pointed at the high score and told her, you see that score? Well, it's about to change. She leaned over to check out the high score, putting her big oversprayed hair in the way. Then told me, nice top score. That's going to be a tough one. But again, she didn't know who she was talking to. Wasn't going to be a hard one for me. There I was on my last Miss Pac-Man. And I knew I wasn't going to beat the high score with this token. But that's okay. Even a great baseball player needs a warm-up, right? So I had a pocket full of other quarters. If it wasn't going to go down with this one, it was going to go down soon. As I cleared level 5, the girl kept watching. I ate a power pellet, but missed all the ghost. This caused her to laugh. Are you sure you're going to beat that score today? She asked me. I took my eyes off the game and turned to her. She stood there with a smirk on her face, chewing a piece of bonkers candy. I couldn't take my eyes off of her. She looked nothing like the girls in my town. She was a vision of a 13-year-old's dream. I just stood there staring at her as I heard my final Miss Pac-Man die. She smiled. You're dead, honey, she said as I snapped out of it and turned back to the game. I let her know that, hey, this was my first game, it was a warm-up, and then asked if she could do any better. This was a question back home I asked many people before beating them at Miss Pac-Man. Without missing a beat, she asked me how many tokens I had. So I reached back into my Wrangler jeans pockets and pulled out all my tokens. I guess I had about 30 of them, I told her. She looked at my hands that was full of tokens and probably some pocket lint and asked me if I was willing to bet those tokens. One game. High score wins. If she wins, she takes all my tokens. If I win, I get all her tokens. A challenge. I loved it. But I needed to see what she had. I had been conned back home many a times. Wasn't going to let it happen to me again here. So I asked to see her tokens. From the pocket of her acid wash jeans, she pulled out a pink coin purse with the words Lucky Star written on it. She shook it and said, let's do this. I could tell just by the sound alone she had a lot more tokens than I did. So I placed the tokens back in my pocket, leaving one in my hand, and dropped it into the coin slot. Stepped back and told her ladies first. She walked in front of the cabinet, dropping in her token, and the challenge began. I stood there, looking over her shoulder. She took the joystick in her pink neon mesh fingerless gloves. She was good. I could tell that from the start. A lot of players, they just want to clear the board as fast as they can. But she knew how to lure the ghost. She knew how to not only eat the power pellets and the dots, but make sure she got all 4 ghosts each time. She made her way to level 3, and I knew this girl wasn't a first timer. But I've seen good players before, and most would start to lose their skill at level 5, and I was pretty sure this was the case. So level 5 started, and as I guessed, she was quickly killed. I have seen this happen way too many times before. She stepped aside to let me start my round. At this time, she did have a great score, but I wasn't worried. I knew each ghost I ate mattered. And I started out pretty strong. I even made it to level 6 before I got killed by a ghost coming out the right exit. We both continued the game, eating power pellets, ghosts, fruits, the dots, clearing level after level. We were close in score. Sometimes she would pass me, I would pass her, then she would come back and pass me again, and I would pass her again. That was until level 13. Dreaded number 13. She lost her last Miss Pac-Man trying to go after the apple. Never go after the fruits. They're a trap, I reminded her. She hit the side of the cabinet with a fist as Miss Pac-Man shrinkled up and died. She was done, but she was done with a very impressive score. 71,140. This was better than any high score I ever saw back home. Well, not counting the ones I made myself. She stepped out of the way and I stepped up as I started to play with my last Miss Pac-Man. My last score, 53,660. Not a bad score, but with one Pac-Man left, I knew I had to eat every ghost I could. Just clearing the boards, I wasn't going to be able to pass her. I'm not going to lie, I was nervous. More nervous than I ever been playing anyone at Miss Pac-Man. Sure, I was behind a few levels, but I could do this. I mean, it wasn't that hard. Just clear some boards and eat as many ghosts as I could. But there wasn't much room for error. Not with one Miss Pac-Man left. And I played it with skill, and I was getting closer. I hit 60,000 and started level 12. I was in good spirits. I felt, I got this. But the ghosts were getting harder and harder to catch, not staying blue very long. So I knew I was missing too many ghosts and I had to do something. And then I saw it. The bouncing banana. The banana is worth 5,000 points. If I ate the banana, it would give me breathing room to where I wouldn't have to focus so much on the ghost. She leaned closer to me to remind me, it's a trap. Don't go after the fruit. She was right. It's a trap to go after the fruit most of the time. But this was like someone waving $5,000 in front of you. You just have to go for it. If I eat this banana, I don't have to worry about eating every ghost on the next following board. This ghost eating the banana would push me over 70,000, a lot closer to beating her score of 71,140. I knew I had to eat it. She knew I had to eat it also. And there it was, the banana, dancing its way down the board. Coming down the left side, I was already there. All I had to do was zoom right up, grab the banana before it made it out the exit. So I headed toward it. The banana turned to go to the exit. It was a close call. But as soon as the banana was about to disappear off into the exit and off the game board, my Miss Pac-Man chomped down and I saw 5,000 appear on the board. Whew, breathing room. For a few seconds, as my Miss Pac-Man came out the other side of the screen and ran into Pinky the Ghost. It was over. That was my last Miss Pac-Man. My final score, 71,020. 121 points away from beating her score. I was just a few dots and a couple of ghosts away. Seeing my defeat, she patted me on the back. And she told me, sometimes you do just have to go for it. As the game ended, I pulled the tokens from my pocket. Handing them to her, I told her, even Mean Joe Green loses sometimes, as she took my coins and put them in the pocket of her Debbie Gibson backpack. I asked her if she wanted to do a rematch, but she turned me down. She did hand me one of her tokens and told me, here, this one's on me. And she turned and walked into the crowd. Wait, I yelled. This whole time I never knew her name and I had to find out. What's your name? I yelled across to her. She looked back and said, etc. Then disappeared into the dark, loud arcade. Etc. What kind of name was that? I thought as I turned back to play Miss Pac-Man one more time. That's when I looked down at the screen and noticed the top 10 list. Every score on that list had the initials ETC. Etc. Could that be what ETC stands for? Was she the one that held all these amazing scores? As I looked over the scores, each one I looked at was more impressive than the previous one. I didn't see her anymore the rest of the day. In fact, we stayed there 5 more days, and every day I would return back to the arcade hoping to run into her. I never did. The only thing I did find was new Miss Pac-Man high scores with the same initials, ETC. Over the years, my family and I would return back to Atlantic City, and I would always stop by the arcade in hopes of running into her one last time. But it never happened, and in the early 90s, the Miss Pac-Man machine went away and was replaced by some kind of dumb dancing machine. After that, the arcades just started to die. But even now, if I'm at some small pizza place with a backroom arcade, I always take a moment to look inside. If anyone asks me what I'm looking for, I tell them I'm looking to see if they have Miss Pac-Man. But the truth is, I'm looking for her, to see if she's in there, taking someone for all their tokens. Well, that was my memory from the arcade. I'm sure you had some fun at the arcade. Let me know in the comments below. Thank you for watching. We'll be back very soon with another video.
Thank you, sir, for that unsolicited testimony.